Hi, my name is Dr. Catherine Hughes from Crime Psych. I run a business that enables me to bring knowledge and learning to everyone, not just those who are studying at schools, colleges and university. And I do this by producing a range of blogs, vlogs and free online courses. And I also run some face-to-face courses as well. If you go to my website after you've finished watching this, you'll find all of the free resources, blogs and vlogs and courses that are available there, as well as some slightly more in-depth courses, and you don't need any previous qualifications to learn with me. In the first two videos in the series that I talked about how attachment and social control could either lead a person to carry out criminal or deviant behaviour or could inhibit it. I will put the link to the first and the second videos in the description box below, and it's important that you do watch these first, as this video is a continuation of that discussion. In this video, I'm going to be discussing whether or not there's any evidence that the differences in attachments between males and females has an impact on criminal or deviant behaviour. For many, many years, researchers only conducted studies on males in relation to criminal and deviant behaviour. These studies either assumed that men and women are the same, or that women commit such small amounts of crime that it would be difficult to study. According to social control theorists, processes that enhance or prevent delinquency are gender neutral, and the gap in delinquency between males and females can be explained by differences in the quality of the bonds that they have to their parents. They argue that social ties to parents are stronger in females than they are in males, and they say this explains why female levels of delinquency are much lower than those of males. Some scholars disagree on whether sex differences actually exist in attachment relationships. According to Delguis in 2009, sex differences exist in the quality of the attachment relationships, yet secure attachments are similarly often found in males as well as females. In a nutshell, Delguis states that females are more vulnerable to develop anxious, ambivalent patterns of attachments, while males are expected to adopt the avoidant attachment type. As a consequence, males are more likely to adopt competitive and aggressive traits and externalizing problems, whereas females are more likely to develop internalized problems such as anxiety and depression. However, in 2005, researchers called Bakermans-Kramberg and colleagues criticised Delguis's model for a lack of statistical evidence to support the claims. They ran a big analysis called a meta-analysis, and they didn't find any support for the hypothesis of any sex differences in attachment styles. Studies of sex differences in the link between attachment and delinquency are fairly scarce, and they can have very conflicting findings. Some studies have reported stronger effects of attachment in girls, whereas others have concluded that the family bond is more important to boys. For example, it was found that the family strain and the quality of the parental caregiving had stronger effects on males than it did on females. Insecure attachment was more strongly linked to externalizing behaviour in samples with boys than in samples with girls. A third group of researchers found very few sex differences in family-related factors of delinquency. A researcher named Moffat and colleagues extensively investigated the potential sex differences in the prevalence of risk factors and the impact of family risk factors on delinquency. And they concluded that, in general, boys seem to be more exposed to risk factors of delinquency rather than them being more vulnerable for risk factors for delinquency compared to girls. Furthermore, the findings as to whether there are sex differences with regards to the link between attachment and delinquency have been fairly inconsistent. Apart from potential differences between males and females in the link between attachment and delinquency, Differences may appear depending on the sex of the parent for several reasons. First, the quality of the time fathers and mothers spend with their child is different. In general, mothers traditionally spend more time in taking care of their children. This could result in stronger ties to mothers and a stronger effect of the quality of the mother-child bond. Secondly, there are some indications that parental involvement is also qualitatively different between some parents and children. This means that the quality of the relationship that a parent has with their child makes a difference. It has been found that offending behaviour by the father predicts delinquent behaviour of their sons, and that was found by Farrington in 2001. The longer antisocial fathers live with their families, the higher the risk of their children's antisocial behaviour. So the longer a delinquent father is around, the higher the children are at risk from becoming involved in criminal or delinquent behaviour. A possible explanation for that is that the attachment relationships to these fathers are more problematic. Attachment relationships are influenced by the extent to which the parent is sensitive to the needs of their child. Although fathers and mothers have been found to be equally capable of sensitive parenting, fathers tend to exercise their sensitivity less often than the mothers do. This is essential since delinquency is more common amongst boys than of girls. Despite this possibility, both control theory and attachment theory, they're not very clear about the effects of the attachments to fathers. Importantly, relatively little research has examined the quality of the attachment relationship to fathers compared to the attachment to mothers in relation to the child's delinquent behaviour. So it's impossible to say whether it's the quality or quantity of information of attachment between the mother and the father that predicts a delinquent child. Finally, it's unknown whether the consequences of insecure attachment relationships or poor bonds to their parents with regards to delinquency gradually change over time, or whether this potential change is different for boys than it is for girls. Many studies have found evidence to suggest that poor attachment relationships to parents do increase the risk of delinquent behaviour within the child. However, they didn't consistently investigate whether there are gender differences in attachment and offending. Therefore, it is difficult to come to any sort of a solid conclusion as to how important attachment is and whether or not there is enough evidence to suggest that there are significant differences between males and females attaching to their mothers or fathers. There is evidence that the presence of antisocial fathers may actually increase the children's risk for problem behaviours in the future though. Furthermore, it remains unclear whether attachment to father has a different effect on delinquency in sons and daughters than attachment to the mothers. Finally, previous studies have not systematically investigated whether the attachment delinquency link varies by age, that is, whether the link is stronger in younger children or in adolescence and early adulthood. From a personal point of view, I don't think that either social control theory or Bowlby's attachment theory can adequately suggest that the age or the quality of the relationship can significantly predict a child's involvement in crime and delinquency later on. Let's take, for example, two sisters being brought up by a mother and a father. They may have a very secure attachment. They're both securely attached to their parents. And there have been cases where one child has gone off and achieved highly, where the other child has gone off and received a life sentence for violent behaviour. So two children brought up in the same household with the same level and quality of attachment has not been investigated well enough, in my opinion. In conclusion then, Both attachment theory and social control theory suggest that the way a child is treated and forms bonds with their parents has an impact on whether or not they're likely to engage in criminal behaviour. Attachment bonds are not exclusive to parents. Throughout life, we form different bonds and different attachments within our communities and within our work or relationship life. There is also some evidence to suggest that males and females bond differently, and this may account for variations in criminal involvement. The birth order of children has been attributed to certain characteristics of children. Alfred Adler was one of the first in the field of psychology to theorise about differences in birth order and what differences in behaviour that could result in. The research suggests that firstborns are believed to be more conservative. They're viewed as leaders who follow the rules. They submit to authority, and they're often more ambitious than other birth order positions, and they're also more comforting. Adler suggested that firstborns tended to be motivated to achieve than the later born children. They're usually good at pleasing adults and in behaving in socially appropriate ways. They typically adhere to the rules and they expect the same from other people. They are also the dethroned children who must deal with the birth of a second sibling. And because of this, they work hard to stay ahead of the other siblings and keeping their special place within the family. Middle-born children are considered to be more rebellious and more likely to challenge authority. They often have a more difficult time finding a place of significance within their family setting. Because of their middle position, they are often the peacemakers in family disputes and become experts at negotiation. They learn to be competitive because they have to keep up with the older siblings while trying to stay ahead of the youngest siblings. Adler believed that the middle child was particularly at risk from becoming discouraged from their activities. The second child must find a way to measure up to the accomplishments of the firstborn child or find a place of significance through other means. For example, if the firstborn finds significance through academic achievement and pleasing, the second may compete with the older sibling and find significance through another area, such as sport or music or an ability to develop strong social relationships. Adler described this child as appearing to be in a race to overtake the firstborn child. Youngest siblings are often viewed as being pampered, dependent, immature and responsible. They tend to be more sociable and usually get the most attention. Others often do things for them. They learn to use this to their advantage, and they often use charm and manipulation to get people to do things for them. Adler described only children as being kind of the centre of attention and striving for attention from adults more than their peers. Only children are often leaders and they'll have a more difficult time going along with other people, especially in groups of their peers. They typically carry feelings of entitlement. A typical characteristic of an only child is the carefulness that results from the extreme amount of attention they receive growing up. It's believed that independence, sociableness, responsibility and thoughtfulness are qualities associated with the only child position. There are many studies that suggest that the way our parents act and how well we attach to them does have an impact on our involvement in criminal or deviant behaviour, and our place of birth within the family may also have an impact on this. There are also statistically proven models that suggest how we form other attachments within our social world influences our behaviour. Firstly, as I've just mentioned, the order in which we're born has been found to influence our personality and behaviour. However, these studies are suggesting that the individual has little to no influence on their own behaviour. They have no autonomy over their behaviour whatsoever. These theories put a large emphasis on the way that the parents behave and how well children form attachments. However, as a parent myself, I know that the way I treat my children can vary from day to day, depending on my emotional state or my emotional needs. If I'm having a particularly bad day, I might be harsher with the children and might make more demands of them. Very little is mentioned of what the outcome might be if they had a controlling mother and a sensitive father, for example. This research largely diminishes the effect for peer groups. For some, early crimes are more likely to be committed by people with lots of social connections. Parent deficit doesn't automatically lead to children becoming criminals. Peers, their friends, their families, who they hang around with at school, have a lot of influence on a child's personality, just as the child's environment does. Are we really to believe that all criminals will have parents who've treated them similarly? A person can be brought up to be controlling or dismissive by the parents, and they may not be criminals themselves, and it isn't inevitable that they'll share the same life outcomes as their parents. Very little credit is given within these theories to personal choice and moral development. Therefore, I believe that we should be looking at several areas within psychology to draw upon investigating the causes of criminal and deviant activity. I do hope that I've given you something to think about and that you've learned a little bit something from this final video on the attachment series. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.